Guru Vajradhara Sumatimu Nishas Uta Vardanya Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Om Guru Vajradhara Sumatimu Nishasanekar Uta Vardanya Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Om Guru Vajradhara Sumatimu Nisha Uta Vardanya Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Pakyuke Kodangandagi Loya Pakyuke Sundangandagi Pakyuke Tudang Dagi Ye Tuyerme Chiktu Jingi Alo Pakyuke Kudam Dagilu Pakyuke Sundan Daginga Pakyuke Tudam Dagi Tuyerme Chiktu Chingilo Makyuke Kudam Dagilo Makyuke Sundan Daginga Makyuke Tudam Dagi Tuyerme Chiktu Jingilo Om Muni Muni Mahamuni Shakyamuni Svoha Om Muni Muni Mahamuni Shakyamuni Svoha Om Muni Muni Mahamuni Shakyamuni Svoha Sangye Chudan Tsoge Chonam La Chancho Pardo Dani Kyapsuchi Dagi Jinso Gibe Sonam Rola Pinchira Sangye Drupara Shua Sangye Chudan Tsoge Chonam La Chancho Pardo Dani Kyapsuchi Dagi Jinso Gibe Sonam Ki Rola Pinchira Sangye Drupara Shua Sangye Chudan Tsoge Chonam La Chancho Pardo Dani Kyapsuchi Dagi Jinso Gibe Sonam Ki Rola Pinchira Sangye Druparasho.
In the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, I take refuge until enlightenment. With the practice of generosity and the other perfections, May I obtain Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings.
Buonasera.
Good evening. For some reason, and I wouldn't know exactly why, or why, which one, or why many, nothing has ever come to us directly written by Buddha. Many of the texts that refer back to Buddha were written about 300 years after him, and Buddha himself never left anything written. And one might ask why. Did he not know how to write? At the time in India, there was writing, and he had one of the best educations possible. And there were various, and even if he couldn't write well, there were kings, there were people that could have written for him, and instead he didn't leave anything written. And it's said that it said, I will be present for those who want to follow the path that I've shown. I will be present through the masters who want to represent me, who want to show the path. And one of the meanings for this is the importance of the human contact, because we need to be guided by someone, not by a concept. And a book transmits concepts, and the concepts over the years, over the centuries, they change the meaning, the same words. As the culture changes, as the context changes, the meaning can change. So it's as if if Buddha had left something written, his tradition would have been defined by the written word and not by the people. Instead, Buddha, it's said that he said, and I will be present and I will continue to guide through those who will transmit the teachings. And he always gave a very important emphasis on the direct human contact. And he or she who has this job to transmit, to be able to adapt himself to the mentality, the context, and to those present, those who need to receive. And it's also said that about 300 years after his death, soon after the disciples, they came together, the direct disciples came together, and I always forget his name, but it's said that he lived in the mountains near the present-day Burma, and he physically had very similar appearance to Buddha, and so sometimes there was some confusion, as he would go around in India, they would mistake him for Buddha, and so to not have this problem, he went to meditate in the cave in the mountains. And for some reason, when he came back, he gathered the community, the various disciples, the thousands of people, and he organized everything, we can say, then he absolutely yelled at Ananda, who was the closest assistant to Buddha. Here's just a small story. He was always there, always close to him, serving Buddha. And it's interesting that when Ananda offered himself to be the attendant to Buddha, he asked that there be a condition, and the condition was, I will dedicate my life to serve you, but I want to be everywhere where you go. Or, let it not be that I will be kept from going certain places. I've seen, so you can see even today there are some disciples, some attendants who are very sticky to their masters, and this is already at the time of Buddha was like this. And what happened? There are two very important stories come from this. One is that when Buddha left his body, when he passed away, the disciples came together and they started telling each other, one another, what they had heard from him. And at the time, people had an amazing memory. I mean, just even look 20 years ago. I mean, our memories were better, weren't they? What about telephone numbers, for example? To not talk about other things. I mean, our ability, even just our ability to find a road. If I say, go to that city and find, go look for that person and with this address and without the GPS, people say, how can I manage that? I don't know. Take a map. Ask people. Use your intuition. I mean, maybe you'll make a couple of wrong turns, but you'll get there. Anyway, so the fewer external tools we have, the better we develop our inner instruments, our inner tools. So more than 2,600 years ago, the disciples of Buddha in that time, I mean, there was, it wasn't easy to write things down. There was no internet, no computer, so memories, people's memories were very high, very finely tuned. So disciples got together, and there was one main one would say what they heard, and that's why all the sutras of Buddha start with one day I heard. So I found myself in this place together with the Buddha, and together with Buddha there was this, that, and the other disciple. And so first the context is given. So we were in Milan at the Kunpen Gangchen, and there was this, that, and the other person, and we were here in this place. And at a certain point, this person asked this question, and Buddha answered like this. Since more than one person was present at that time, they had different versions, and when the versions matched, they would say that it was a valid sutra. But there were certain events where Ananda was present, but the others weren't. But to be able how can I say? So for it to be a valid, it's said that one needs a certain amount of spiritual realization. That when you obtain, it's said when you understand a non-conceptual perception of interdependence and the way that every phenomenon is connected. So one doesn't relate to reality in an objective way, but in its total interdependence. I'm simplifying completely, but that's, when one reaches a state of an arhat, when one eliminates one's own ignorance in just a few words. And it's said that when you reach that state, one has access to all memories of everything that one has heard, lived, or seen in this life. So it has the access to all memories. So they were trusting those who had reached that state to tell what Buddha had taught. But Ananda hadn't reached that state. You know, he was there washing, you know, he was there washing clothes for Buddha, but but he never, you know, sat down to seriously meditate. And this continues generation after generation, because, you know, those who are attendants to the masters, they are busy doing other things. You know, there are many other benefits. They have many other benefits too, but they don't meditate as much. So they all got together. They needed Ananda to reach this state of arhat, and they were there, like, you know, rooting for him. And at a certain point, he does, and then that's where we get all of the tales, you know, all the stories from Ananda. So that's one story. Another one was he was yelled at. He was scolded because it's at a certain point Buddha went to Ananda and said at a certain point, "Oh, my dear Ananda, you know, a Buddha, if he wanted, or if he were asked, he could live for tens of thousands of years." And Ananda said, "Oh, how wonderful." Then the Buddha says, "No, listen well, Ananda, a Buddha, if he wanted, but if he were asked, if someone made the request to him, he could live for tens of thousands of years." And Ananda says, "Oh, I just rejoice, that's wonderful." The third time Buddha repeats, "Ananda, listen well, a Buddha, if he wanted, but if he were requested." And he didn't understand. And soon after Buddha left, at 80 years old, he left his body. And that's why we also say that in the tradition of Buddhism, most masters were passed away. Most masters passed away with less than 80, being younger than 80 years old, out of respect, not live longer than their previous masters. This is just a detail, but anyway, Buddha left his body. This master, this disciple who came together, you know, to organize everything, he understood what had happened, and he really scolded Ananda, and they got him to sit and meditate. But so after about 300 years, the sutras of Buddhas existed, but they were all oral. They were all oral transmissions. So people would get together and they would tell the stories. And it would always begin with Digi Dagi, you know, one day, so I heard, I was here, and the one who was able to hear the story would then repeat it to others. About 300 years after Buddha's death, the different versions of the same story started to appear. And at that point, you know, they put together those who had the knowledge, and they wrote down the sutras, about 100 volumes, 108 volumes. And so when people ask, what's the Bible of Buddhism, you know, there's not one Bible, there's not one book, but there are 108 volumes of sutras. Of teachings. In our teachings, our tradition makes reference, uses one volume in particular, and each tradition has certain volumes that are more reference points than others. And something that's really beautiful about Buddhism is that Buddha taught differently depending on the context and depending on those who were listening. Let me give you a simple example, like the refuge prayer, for example. There's the prayer where we recite, I take refuge in Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. Some disciples, he said, you know, what's important is the recitation, and what you think is not as important. What is important is to actually verbalize, recite. It's very important what you recite. Don't worry so much about what you're saying. To other disciples, instead, he said, it doesn't matter at all what you recite. What matters is what you think, You need to generate this state of consciousness. You need to have this kind of visualization. It's not important. The actual words that you say are not important. One master of Lama Gangchen, for example, he say it's not the mouth that reaches enlightenment, it's the mind. But if we take these two indications that Buddha gave, on one side he says the refuge prayer is through recitation, and then the other indication is that it's the mind and mental state of being that matters. It seems like they're contradictory, and one could go in and be confused. But what happens to those who were told, that the recitation is important? For example, if here among us, maybe said, okay, no. Instead, here we say the recitation is not important. You should need to have a strong wish to get out of samsara, and you need to know well the Four Noble Truths. You really need to understand the all-permeating suffering as suffering. You need to really understand and want to reach nirvana, and to be able to reach Buddhahood. If you see, maybe 90% of people would say, oh, that is too difficult, even here in this context. Yeah, more than 90%. Instead, we say, no, instead we say, the refuge prayer. We recite, we have a ceremony, and then little by little you understand. So those who were ready to generate that state of consciousness, Buddha said, that the meaning is important, and those who weren't ready, he gave them that other indication on the importance of recitation. So sometimes it can seem contradictory, but instead they're complementary, we could say. The classic example is there's a part of Buddhist teachings, where he says, there's in the school, the Vaibhasika Sautantrika school, for example, Buddha explains how things exist. And he says that he talks about a solid reality, a material reality. The example, he talks about the relationship between the senses and the objects, that what you perceive is the light, but there is this external light. And it's very similar to our materialistic scientific view. He talks about a reality that exists. In the Sautantrika school, that's just right afterwards, talks about the intrinsic attributes of phenomenon. They say, okay, you put your hand on a fire, it's going to burn. If you see alcohol, if you see grappa, and you think it's water and you drink it, is it going to become water? No, it's grappa. One day in 1992, there was this Geshe, Losang Tempa, if I remember well, and it was already quite an older monk in his 60s, and he had gone to Brazil to open up a Dharma center in Rio de Janeiro, and these people had met him in Nepal. He wasn't of our organization, but he was invited there. The people were so happy to see him when he arrived that they went running to him in the airport, Brazilian style, and to hug him. I know he had spent his whole life in the monastery, and he came to a context that he didn't know, and so, so she came. This disciple, she came close to him, and he kept backing up, and he really felt like a fish out of water. Wasn't understanding, and this lady, she was so upset because she would say, "Oh, you talk about compassion, but you don't show any kind of affection," and it started badly, and so. And actually, after about 6 months, the center closes, and he ended up at my mom's house. And so he was coming to our center, Lama Gangchen's house, and I remember him when we were together. Anyway, so one day he went to do a blessing ceremony, a blessing of a place, and there's in this ceremony there's the inner offering, and I'm not going to explain everything about it now, but it's this object here. It's very it's to symbolize the generation of a state of great bliss, and you can use black tea or even alcohol, and there weren't all the implements because it was at the beginning, and so he asked for a little bit of alcohol and a little bit of water, and they brought him two glasses, one with water and one with pinga, which is grappa, the Brazilian grappa. So he took the glass what he thought was water and he drank it in Indian style. Because when we drink, for example, what do? We put first in the liquid in our mouth, and then we swallow. And in India, instead, they're able to open up their throat, and then they're able to swallow the liquid directly. So he took this glass that was a little bit bigger than this, and he just drank it in a shotgun. He's someone who had, and it was alcohol, and he had never had alcohol in his whole life. And the ceremony, he did it like in 3 seconds and then went home to sleep. But and then he drank like 5 liters of water because he was just burning his throat. But my point of the story is that, that the grappa, we could say that grappa has an intrinsic characteristic as grappa, or if you think that it's water, it becomes water. If you think it's water, it's a erroneous perception because it can't sustain the characteristics of water. So these first schools, Buddha talked about this material reality, this solid reality, and we study these schools. These are the first 2 schools that we need to study before going to look at the subjective reality. One needs to have his feet on the ground. Because if I start about talking about a subjective reality without having seen the so-called objective characteristics, then there's a risk of falling into the trap of nihilism. Instead, those who were not ready to see the subjective side, the subjective part, he talked about a reality that was more objective. And that third school, it's called the Chittamatra, the mind-only school. He said that nothing exists independently of the mind. It's the most complex school of all the schools to understand. It's many shades, to understand it well. But in this school, the important point was any experience that you have, you live it through your mind. And everything that you live is the result of the actions that you did in the past, your karma, and the karma is born in your mind. So everything that exists comes from the mind and is created in the mind. And so nothing has an intrinsic, independent characteristic that's independent of the observer. And so now here we're going to a totally different extreme. And so after this, Buddha got to this last school called the Madhyamika. This is the middle way. He says reality is neither is not objective nor objective. It's a middle way, and then there are 2 steps here. One part, he explains this part. He says that reality is made up of two parts. There's the object and the perceiver. There's a part that's objective, and then there's a part that's subjective that they unite. And another school says, no, there's nothing objective. Everything that exists exclusively in a reciprocal dependence. Nothing can be seen or experienced independently of the interdependence, which is very close to the quantum physics view. For example, I don't exist without the interdependence of all of you, because I'm influenced by your present. Every phenomenon, nothing exists that can be observed, perceived, or can exist in an autonomous and independent, independent from everything it interacts with. Independent from what it interacts with. So all these different schools that Buddha transmitted, they're actually like they're rungs on a ladder, or stairs, steps on stairs that take us to. So they take us to having an understanding of a reality that's more and more coherent. And these are the 4 schools of Buddhist philosophy. And what's beautiful is that we study all 4 schools in Southeast Asia, the Theravada schools, for example. Maybe you've heard of the Theravada school. The first school, which is the Vaibhasika, was divided into 18 schools, and one of them was the Theravada. And in this context, also where Buddha transmitted monastic vows, and the vows are different depending on the place. There are some vows that are present in one place and not in another. I'll give you one example. For example, in some monastic transitions, in some places, because he traveled a lot, in some communities, he said that the monastic vows are for life. And if at a certain point you don't want to maintain the vows, then you can't go back, you can't take them again. So it's a choice you make once, and it's forever. And the day that you renounce your vows, you can't take them again. Instead, to others, he said, you start by taking the vows for a certain amount of time. A year, a month, 3 months, the amount of time you want. And then go back. You can go back to your lay life, and then you can come back and take your vows again until you decide that you want to take them for life. If you do, Atisha, for example, when he got to Tibet in the 11th century, the monastic transition that he came from was this system, which is the same one that exists in Thailand, where there's a tradition where one can become a monk for a week. But the king of Tibet at the time, who knew the Tibetans well, he went to Atisha and said, "Listen, master, the Tibetan people are very wild. If you give them the vows for just a certain amount of time, then they're just going to have a party at the end, and then they would abuse something very special. I mean, this also, being able to take vows for a certain amount of time is wonderful, but it can also be abused. So at the time, they had to invite another master, especially, to be able to transmit the lineage, this lineage that the Buddha had transmitted, of the vows being taken just once. Just to say that even here, Buddha transmitted it in different ways according to the needs and the capacities of his disciples. And the Theravada was one of these 18. So in Tibet, so many teachings from so many different masters, and one of the great abilities that the Tibetans had at the time was being able to take everything that they received and put them together harmoniously. The Tibetan medicine, for example, I think it was Sonsin Gampa, king, but I make confusion sometimes. But at a certain point, this king was sick, and then he invites the best doctors from India, from China, and from Persia, present-day Iran. So Chinese medicine, Ayurvedic medicine, and then and then also these local Tibetan medicines, and they worked together, and he was healed. And then he says, I want you to stay here. I want you to be able to develop your medicines. And over time, they actually melted. There was a kind of fusion. So Ayurveda, so Ayurvedic tradition, Chinese tradition, and the Persian, actually more Greek, we can say, right? Greek medicine, they came together and gave birth to Tibetan medicine. So getting back to what I was saying is that we study all 4 philosophical views because they help us reach one step after the other. So I got a little enthusiastic because I like this topic so much, but the point is that there are many, many sutras. The Buddha has many, many sutras. And another great problem would be if we were in front of all of the sutras. I mean, where would we start? And Buddha said this here. I mean, let's say that we had the ability to read them and understand them. Because even just the way they're written, it's difficult to understand them. But let's say that we were able to understand, and we'd say, okay, well, here he said this, and there he said that, so who's right? And here, Lama Tsongkhapa, you can see him behind me. One of the most incredible, one of the works that he did, his masterpiece, was a text, is the excellent explanation of how to discern the interpretable and the non-interpretable teachings of Buddha. So he took all the sutras of Buddha, all the teachings, one by one, and he said, here, Buddha said this, but he meant to say this. This is the meaning. He said he said this, but this is what he meant. So he created this coherence. Among all the teachings related to the correct view of reality. It's very difficult. It's studied in all the monasteries. And we had the great luck to have masters to be able to eat all of this and digest it for us and give it to us. I'll understand. Once I went to my philosophical teacher, Geshe Thupten Rinchen, it was an important text and he said to me, your teeth are not strong enough to eat that. So even if you read it, you're not going to understand it. It's too dense. It's too difficult. You need to take the commentaries, because as the centuries went on, a master then would read and digest and then write a commentary, etc. So and then we close this introduction. So how do the teachings get to us today? Today we make reference to certain texts, mostly Lamrim, this graduated path to enlightenment, and Lojong, mind training. These are these teachings that talk about this graduated path to enlightenment, and they come mostly from two parts of text. One that has to do with the graduated path, and another one that has to do with the correct view of reality, mostly, which is called the ornament of clear realization. And another text called the root of the Madhyamika, the middle way, or also called entering the middle way. So anyway, Buddha wrote the Sutra of the Perfection of Wisdom, which he wrote. It was then transcribed, and this same sutra exists in three main versions. It's the same meaning in three different versions. One is of 100,000 verses, one is 20,000, and one is 8,000 verses. The 8,000 verse sutra is the most common, most well known that we read, that we recite, and then there are the commentaries of each one. And of these two commentaries, I've read them both. You can understand them not so much. I've memorized a good part of them. And there are three levels of commentaries here, and little by little you get there. And we have the great luck that great masters like Lama Tsongkhapa made a summary, let's say. They were able to take all these complexities, because before people used to have time. They would dedicate their lives to study, to Buddhist philosophy. So, why do you want to get right away to the conclusion when the path is circular? It's not linear, and it helps you understand things better. This antique way of studying, you study, you don't understand well, but then at a certain point you do, but we just don't have the time like they used to. We have the great luck that we have those who did have this time. They brought us these teachings of Buddha and said, this is the summary. This is the meaning. And great masters, like when there was the Cultural Revolution, and many texts were destroyed. For example, they said if we had to decide, which text to keep, to save, that they would prefer to keep the commentaries of Lama Tsongkhapa compared to keeping the original sutras of Buddha. Just to say that of all these teachings, the part of the worldview can be summarized into four views, and they're also highlighted. These are also highlighted the four points that are common to all four schools. So remember the first one is divided into 8, but there are 4 points that are common to all schools, and they're called the 4 seals. In just a few words, the first one is everything, all composed phenomena are impermanent. The second one is everything that is impure is of the nature of suffering. Another day we'll talk more about it. But the third one is all phenomena are empty and lack a true existence. And the fourth is beyond suffering there is peace, or nirvana is peace. And among all of these, the first one, the starting point is impermanence. The starting point of the worldview that Buddha transmitted, that is common to all the schools that Buddha transmitted, is that we live in an impermanent reality. And what does that mean? In our Western modern language, when we hear the word impermanence, what do we think about? If I say this glass is impermanent, what idea comes to you? That the glass sooner or later won't be there, or that it's in constant transformation? If we start philosophizing and analyzing, we say, oh, it's in constant transformation. But the first thought, when we hear the word impermanent, we think that it won't be there anymore. But that's not the correct way to understand impermanence. The definition of impermanence is not that it one day will not exist. The definition of impermanence is, and I like how it sounds in Tibetan. The definition is Kechigma. Kechik means instant. If we want to be very precise, take 4 seconds and divide it into 60 parts, or 67 parts. One of these 67 parts is this instant. You know, in the antique way of dividing up time, you know. So this shortest time is a breath, is the 4 seconds. And so these 4 seconds can be divided into 67 parts. And it's said that it's the shortest amount of time that the brain can perceive. It's, you know, so that kind of, that nanosecond, you know, that's the shortest, just out of a curiosity, you know, since I say this because it's to show you how detailed it is, but it's defined as an instant. So it's this the shortest amount of time that the brain can perceive, this instant, this kechik. Kechik is an instant. Kechik, from instant to instant. Ki, jikpa. Ki is a grammatical particle that shows action, verb. So from action generates generates an action. Jikpa, transform. So it is no longer what it was. It becomes something different. To transform doesn't mean to end. Transform means it continues to exist, but not as it was before. It's very, I mean, the idea of transforming is very different to ending. So chikpa means that which transforms from instant to instant. So in other words, that which is in constant transformation. This is what impermanence means. So anything that is impermanent is in constant, in every moment, in constant transformation. It's never static. It seems to us as being static. Still, because in just a few words, we have a perception of reality that is quite, how can I say, is short-sighted. From far. So some things we just don't notice. But if we were to take a microscope and we look into the glass, is there movement in the glass? Yes. This process that gradually process actually ages, you know, this happens. And if you see things under a microscope, you can perceive these things. I saw this book in this book of physics. For example, if you look a forest from far away, it looks like nothing's happening. But then if you start getting closer and closer, you see that there's so much going on. Or just look down on the ground in the grass and just use this. It's a metropolis of insects. And it's like this for everything. But we have a view of reality that is really generalized, and as long as that generalized view works, we don't perceive change. But the more detailed vision I have of you, the more I will perceive the changes. The more coarse my perception of you is, the less I'll be able to perceive changes. So reality is in constant transformation, even if we're not able to perceive everything. So now, what does that mean to transform, and why do things change? What generates change? Why is there transformation? Because there's interaction. If there wasn't interaction among the parts, then there wouldn't be change, there wouldn't be transformation. Because for anything to exist, it transforms once it interacts. And since phenomena are in constant transformation, then they're in constant interaction, they're in constant transformation. And then we'll look at this after. So anything transforms once it interacts. An image that can help us understand this better. For example, if I take some jam, some marmalade. And I don't want the marmalade to transform much, the jam. I'm going to put it in the refrigerator. Why should I put it in the fridge? Because by lowering the temperature, I'm going to diminish the amount of interactions. I block certain processes and there'll be less interaction. By interacting with artificial then it have other process. I remember I talked to his chef once and he said you shouldn't put vegetables in the refrigerator, you kill them. It was somewhere near Albagnano. For example, he doesn't have a fridge. He has a cantina, and he has the baskets down in the cellar, and then he puts the vegetables down there, and then puts like the yurt that's damp on top. Anyway, I'm not saying you should put vegetables, in cellophane or. But the point is that if you put them in the refrigerator, and then there's a different transformation because it comes into contact with this artificial cold. We'll have another transformation, but the basic concept is that the stronger the interaction, the stronger the transformation, and everything transforms as a result of the interactions that are there. Are you following? Now, what's the difference, the main fundamental difference between us and a stone or a tree? A tree is here a little closer, we think. The main difference, as is described, is there's a difference between a sentient being and a living being. A stone has a lifespan, doesn't it? Has a birth. It has a lifespan, and then dies, transforms into something no longer recognizable as the stone. I remember once we were in Tibet, and the roads in Tibet often are along rivers. And we saw on the other side of a river, like pieces of the mountains that were coming down and falling into the lake. And Pete, our friend, was there, and he said, "You see, this is the process of the death of the mountain, because before with the earthquakes or that brought everything up, and now at a certain point, it's finishing. It's just little by little. The stones are now falling down to the river, and that's going to take these stones to the ocean. That then sooner or later are going to then be absorbed and become lava again, and then become mountains again. And it just really changed my view. For me, it was they were just stones falling down, and I was just seeing how a mountain is born and how it dies. And so many mountains are in the initial growing phase. Something I heard that this mountain can continue like 3 centimeters a year. You know, there's some energetic difference between mountains. Going to a mountain that has this energy of growth is much different than going to a mountain that is in the phase of death, and so that has to do a lot. That changes the energy of the place too. So we said a stone has a beginning, and it interacts during its lifespan. It interacts with many things. But just think about a tree. We can understand that a little bit better. But what's the main difference between a living being and a sentient being? A stone and also a plant. They have their own reality that interacts following very specific and precise rules. So if you act in a certain way, it will respond in a certain way. And if you always do the same thing, you will always have the same reaction. And the key, what's the key for to interacting well with beings, human beings, is understanding how to get the favorable responses. So it's easier to deal with plants than with people, because with the plant, if you've understood those 2 or 3 rules, you put the water, you treat with respect and have enough sunlight, or then you know what you're going to get. A sentient being is different. Sentient beings have consciousness. So a sentient being, if you treat me in the same way today, I don't know. I interpret it a little different. I think yesterday okay, but today no. It's true that you said me the same thing and you did the same thing, but yesterday I smiled and today I don't want to smile. But I always did that, and it was always enough. But now it's not enough anymore. Instead, you give the plant what it needs. At a certain point, does the plant become dissatisfied? It looks to the plant next to it and says, "Oh, that plant has more." That doesn't happen. Instead, it happens to us. So what's the key? That we have this so-called consciousness, this ability to perceive, interpret, and direct our mind according to the reality around us. So, we have biological rules, as living beings, but we also have a part. We are also observers, where we're able to interpret and make decisions that are not based on biological rules of interaction, but based on our own interpretation of things. Is this clear? What allows all of this to happen? This allows us to turn right or to left, or just to stay still. When we're in front of an interaction, our interaction is not just a reaction to the phenomenon that we're interacting with. I mean, we're strongly influenced, situations, the people, the objects, etc., etc. We're strongly influenced, by our body, by our past, by many factors. But in the middle of all this, there's this consciousness, and has an enormous power in our interaction. Our consciousness. Is this clear? Even here, I mean, how much freedom do we really have? Very little. Let me explain myself better. No one has the freedom to be what he wants, because even my thoughts, even my consciousness, even my way of perceiving my reality, my subjective reality, is the result of everything that has come before. It's not something that is independent from everything else. The way I perceive and interact with reality, my worldview is influenced by my physical body. It's influenced by my ancestors, by what my social cultural context, my experiences, the experiences I've had, the information I've received. So many factors influence me, but within all of this, even there's still a little part, there is free will where we can choose. And this is very important. A very important point. So, even if free will is very small, it exists. And it's here where we can choose how we want to interact. Because we don't have the choice to interact or not interact. We don't have, and then as a consequence, we don't have the choice of transforming or not transforming our being, every aspect of our life, of our material situation, the relationships we have, the society in which we are a part, our own body, our emotions, our perceptions of the world, our cognitive ability. Each one of these is in constant transformation. So the direction that it transforms in is fruit of the interaction. And that's where we have the ability to direct it in one way or the other. And this is no joke. So when Buddha says all composed phenomena, composed means that which depends on causes and conditions, that which interacts, is impermanent. What does this mean on a practical level? That what I do, what I say, what I think determines who I am, what I experience. In other words, it's the law of karma. But we have this tendency to listen to listen to Buddhist teachings through our own worldview. And when we talk about karma, we think that it has to do with destiny. It has nothing to do with destiny. Karma literally means action, interaction. I speak, I interact. I think, I interact. I'm interacting with myself. I'm interacting with body and mind. I'm interacting with others. Because when I perceive an object, there's an interaction between me and this object. We are constantly interacting through our thoughts, through our speech, our physical actions, our choices. And in this interaction, we construct gradually our reality. And this is called karma. And it's one of the first main points in Buddhism. What does it mean? Buddha described it saying, no matter how highly realized a being can be, and even to the point of becoming a Buddha, if we took the power of all the Buddhists together and put it on one side of the scale, and on the other side of the scale we put the power of the individual karma, the weight is the same. In other words, no one can make me experience something that I have not created the causes for. So everything that I have done, all my choices, take me gradually to be what I am. And you cannot share karma. I can't make I can't make it so that you experience the result of my actions, nor vice versa. And here's a very fundamental point. Everything we experience, anything we experience, is a result of all past experiences, whether we are aware of it or not. What we live in this present moment normally is a direct result of what has just happened, or are we influenced by things that happened a long time ago as well? In other words, are we influenced by things that happened in our adolescence? Yes. There's the immediate past as well, but the strength, the inertia that has been accumulated of all these past choices, and something that's also interesting, trauma, for example, is just, it's said that one description that I've heard is it's an inner process that begins and you're not able to conclude it. Normally, when we live an experience, we have two instincts in front of a situation: is fight or flight. So if a situation that we live as a danger, so we fight or fight or flight, or we run away.
Fight or flight in inglese, no? Sono queste due
These two reactions. This primordial, it's the antique reaction. So when we're in a situation of difficulty and we're blocked without being able to fight or run away, we're just blocked in that experience. And this is one kind of description of trauma. And even on a psychological level, I've understood that, as long as someone is not able to unblock that, then one just keeps reliving that experience again and again. One stays blocked in it. So what happens, even there, if I had interactions in the past and I'm not able to conclude certain cycles, then I'm going to keep living. I'm going to keep interacting with that traumatic experience. Not having fully given its fruit, its result. So, someone asking, can we understand where the free will is? Free will, you can find it in very simple things. It's in the small actions, because our freedom is very, very small. I wake up in the morning, for example. Should I stay in bed or should I stay in bed and sleep a little bit longer, or should I get up and meditate? Should I say this or not say this? Should I show this feeling? Should I show this feeling or not show this feeling? Sometimes one is too taken by an emotion and you don't have this clarity to do it. But these micro decisions, these choices, and our free will is found here in these micro decisions. It's a freedom to make micro choices that allow us to interact in a different way, but we're not free from our past. He'll use an analogy that I don't really like, but you can understand. I'm free to buy anything I want as long as the two conditions are present. I need to have the money for it, and then that thing needs to be for sale. Because if I don't have money and I say, okay, I can buy anything I want. Okay, I'd like this, and then they ask for money, but I don't have it. Oh, but I can buy anything I want. No, only if you have money. Or I can have all the money in the world, but if that thing isn't for sale, then I wouldn't be able to buy it. I can maybe look for illegal ways to get it, but if it's not for sale, I can't buy it. I can't get it. And the same way, to live reality, a certain reality, I need to have created the causes, and the conditions need to be present too. The causes are all the past interactions, and the conditions are the interactions of the present moment. Conditions are of two types: inner conditions that are our own and the outer conditions of others, the inner ones, our thoughts, our body in the present moment. External conditions of others, the actions of other people, the environment, the social, cultural context, that don't depend exclusively on us. And depending on my mental state or my physical state, and in this present moment, and the external factors, I act influenced by past experiences, and this brings to this brings to an immediate result. This is what we talk about when we talk about cause and effects. But to live something, I need to have created the cause. This is in the past, and there need to be also the conditions in the present. So conditions without causes don't bring results, and causes without conditions don't bring results. For example, the metaphor that's always used, if I can add water to soil, but if there aren't the seeds, it's not going to sprout. And if I don't add water to a planted seed, it won't sprout either. So I know that it's difficult for some to accept, and instead it brought me a lot of joy the first time. Others sometimes I hear people say that it's really, really difficult. Anything that we have lived in the past, anything at all in the past, is a result of the complex interaction between all the interactions of the past and the present conditions. We're influenced by people. We're influenced by other people around us, but that's an external condition. It's not the cause. A condition without the cause, there's no result. So it's a bit like an example, that's given is like if someone comes in and slaps me in the face. For me to feel pain, I need two things. I need the hand that slaps me, and also my face. It's not just the result of the hand. The pain that I feel is from the hand, the slap, but also my being there. So you need these two parts. Similarly, what I live, I'm influenced by the conditions around me in this present moment. Absolutely, yes. So let's not take away the responsibility of everyone. But I can't live that for which I have not created the causes myself. Anything that I experience is because in in the complexities of the universe, among the various actions of the past, the various interactions and the conditions, they have brought me to live that. Is that clear? So let's start from the principle that is not unimportent. We are not victims. So one of the first attitudes to follow in what I would say a sincere and deep spiritual path is to stop victimizing yourself. One should stop victimizing himself. I mean, how often do we do that? We're the victim of the government. We're victim of the system. We're victim of the mother-in-law and the husband and the wife and the children, and of this, that, and the other of our past. We're a victim of many, many things, in the sense that we're constantly pointing our finger, saying, I am unhappy because, and if it weren't for that, then I'd be happy. If I'm unhappy, it's because someone did something that they shouldn't have done. Right? Normally, when we're upset or which can happen, there's someone to blame, isn't there? If things aren't going well, it's because someone did something wrong. So we have this tendency to victimize ourselves. And Buddha said this that really touched me. And he says, this, I am my own protector. I am my own enemy. Normally, we live the opposite. We say, I'm not my own protector. My protectors are the others, things that are outside me, and I try to be well. I look for my happiness outside myself, and I depend on others. I'm not my own protector. And we live also, I'm not my own enemy, because if I'm not well, it's not my fault. It's someone else's responsibility. Instead, Buddha said, I am my own protector, and I am my own enemy. What I live, good or bad or ugly, depends on my actions, my choices, my interactions, whether I'm aware of it or not. Because, just like like law itself, the karma doesn't allow for ignorance. I was reading a book by Saviano, and he says at a certain point he was in a boat together with mafiosi, and they were on their way, and he realized that he was in a totally illegal situation, and if the police had come at that moment, he says, I wouldn't have been able to defend myself by saying I didn't know that this was happening. He realized that, he would be in front of the law. He would be responsible. If I, for example, if I have total amnesia and then I commit a crime, even if I totally sincerely say that I didn't remember, that wouldn't take away my responsibility. It's not because I did something stupid and then I forgot about it that I'm not responsible for it. The emotions that we've felt, the things that we've said, the things that we've done, those actions interact and create an inertia among them that sooner or later bring a result. This is the law of karma. So what I live is a result of the actions that I myself have done. But this doesn't take away anybody's responsibility, because in my interacting with you, what you live is the result of your past actions and the conditions that you're finding in. So for you, like my presence is a condition for you, but for me, they're my causes. So, for example, if I slap you in the face, if I slap you in the face and it hurts you, I say, well, that's, don't get upset with me, because if you got slapped in the face, it was just a result of your past actions, and I'm just a condition. No, it's not exactly like this. I mean, you live the result of your actions, but that doesn't take away the responsibility of my interactions. So any action in its interaction, if it brings in a short, medium, or long term, it brings suffering, then it's a negative action. And any action in short, long, and short, medium, and long term, if it brings happiness and well-being, then it's said to be a virtuous and positive action. These are the definitions of negative and positive actions. If I act with violence towards someone or hatred, this brings suffering to the other one lives it as suffering, but for me, in mid and long term, will also bring me suffering. So it's a negative action, and as the consequence should be avoided. So, it's not because it's your karma that is having you meet this condition and ripening, a past action for you, that takes away the responsibility of my actions. So, as we said before, everything is in constant transformation, and every small part interacts, and this is actually marvelous because every small part has an enormous power. Every time I think about this, I think of the same story, that just look at our lives. I mean, here we are today. What were the causes and conditions that were necessary for you to be here now? Once, a friend asked me, and he had just survived an airplane crash, a small private plane. He was there with he was with the whole family, and they were flying from one place to another, and the plane went down. So they had an emergency landing, and then at a certain point, where they did the landing, they were able to. If it had happened if it happened 2 minutes before, 2 minutes after, they wouldn't have been able to land because it was all forest. But at a certain point, there was a little bit of a mound, and so the plane went down, and it was able to bounce up again. It flew over cows, and then was able to make a more gentle landing, and everyone survived. And when I went to see him after he had this accident, he said, "Oh, many people came to me and said, God didn't want you to die. This is really the act of God, But what would a Buddhist say? I mean, why did it happen?" This is when he came to see me, and that made me think. That time, I gave him a kind of a strange answer. I said the reason why that the plane went down and that you all survived is the same. It's the same reason why you get in the car in the morning, you go to work, and nothing happens. I mean, what's the difference? That in the case of the plane, the way the things happen don't correspond to the expectations. We have our expectation that when I take my car and I go somewhere, it's going to happen like this and that. And then as long as things follow our expectations, we think this is the normal way of interacting. Or, instead, when something goes beyond or goes out of our own programming or expectations, we say it's strange. And if it goes well, it's a miracle. And if it's something bad that happens, it's a curse. But instead, this is just the complexity of interdependence. And what's interesting is that every small action that we do has an enormous effect on the whole. There was a film that really showed this well, which was the life of Benjamin Button. It was many of you have seen it. It's this very, very long. It's never ending. But at a certain point, a girl gets hit by a car, and before showing the scene where the car actually hits her, they show the previous scenes that seem disconnected, with she wakes up late, then someone asks for something and they interact in this way. And so if she hadn't gotten up late, then she wouldn't have taken this way, and this wouldn't have happened, that wouldn't have happened. So it was an interaction of many, many things that brought her to that moment. For that car was in that exact spot as was she that hit her. But the point is that in the complexity of life, every small action has a determining effect. It's never in vain. The anecdote that I remember always is that if I'm here today, it's because I met Lama Gangchen Rinpoche. I mean, this is one of the main causes that brought me to be here today. And to have been able to meet Lama Gangchen Rinpoche, so many things needed to happen first. I mean, he needed to come to the West. And for him to come to the West, he needed to meet someone he needed someone to invite him, to give him a passport, etc. And this happened in Nepal. He was ready to do a 2-year retreat. He had already prepared everything, very simple retreat hut, where he wanted this long retreat. He had done everything to prepare for this retreat, and he went to his friend who became also a teacher of mine, NgalSo, and so he went to his friend and he said, know that we won't see each other for 2 years because I'm going to enter into retreat. And NgalSo said to him, if I were you, in this retreat, I wouldn't be able to recite 100 mantras. And he said, why? He said, with all the debts that you have, you're going to sit down, you're going to sit comfortably and meditate. I wouldn't be able to do that because Lama Gangchen at the time, he was the kind of, he was a kind of Robin Hood, but instead of stealing from the rich, he would take loans from the rich and he would give them to the poor. And there was a lot of poverty at the time, and so he had in India he had debts everywhere. But but since he was a Lama, people were ashamed to go and ask for money back. So they would go to his friend, and the guy NgalSo said, they all come to me asking for the loans back. And these weren't rich people; they were just people who had a little bit more than the others. So he says, and Lama Gangchen told me he was a little bit like this, and then so he didn't go on retreat, and he changed his program. He said, okay, I'll accept an invitation. He had accepted an invitation to go to the north of India in Sikkim, and there was the old king of Sikkim, and the mother of the king had eye sickness, and he was invited there to cure her, to treat her. So he was thinking, I will go there for three months. I will take care of the Queen Mother, and then I'll be able to come back and repay all my debts. He cures her. He becomes very, very well known, and in this this royal palace of Sikkim, was kind of like this building, of Sikkim. Anyway, so people were constantly asking him for healing and advice, and so 3 months became 3 years. So he was there doing healing practices, and towards the end of this 3-year period, there was a family that was very connected with his previous life that lived in Nepal, and so they invite him to Nepal, and when he was in Nepal for Tibetan New Year, this family said that they wanted to offer him a formal long life puja. Was the first, and there was no place to do it. I mean, there weren't monasteries or big gompas. The biggest place was this showroom of Tibetan carpets. Here this rug I have here in front of me was made by the Tsetin, in this Tibetan factory, and during the ceremony there was a client, Greek man, Yurgu, and he had come to buy rugs, and Tsetin said, you can't come to buy rugs today, I'm sorry, but there's a ceremony. And he said, oh, what is this ceremony? I want to see. And he saw Lama Gangchen and he fell in love. And they were very connected. He started crying. I mean, he just was just absolutely struck. And then he invites Lama Gangchen to Greece. I just open and close the parentheses that just a few months before he said that, I want a passport. He said, and he said, why? He said, because I want to travel around the world. And so Setan, he wasn't a disciple at the time, but it was a favor, like for the family. They were able to get him a passport. And then he said, and he gave him the passport, and he said, okay, now I want a visa for every country in the world. And Setan Gurman said, why do you want the visa for every country in the world? It's so expensive, and you don't know anyone outside of Nepal who you want to visit all the countries of the world. And then he was able to give him visas for about 20 different countries. And just a few months later, a month later, there was this encounter with Yurgu. And so he first invites him, and Rinpoche said no. He said, there are many lamas in the West. I don't see why I need to go. And he just insisted. And then Rinpoche said, I'll go on one condition. And the condition is that there are many sick people that your doctors are not able to cure. And Yurgu said, oh, this is absolutely true. And so he invited him and brought him to Greece. And they opened the door for him to come to West. And so I asked myself, if Gen Lapala hadn't said anything, and Lama Gangchen had started his retreat, and hadn't gone to Sikkim, and hadn't, hadn't gone, to Nepal for the long life puja, or if Yurgu hadn't gone to buy a rug that day, maybe he would have stayed in India. Maybe he would have gone somewhere else in Asia. This is that every small event has an enormous effect, power. And what can we do? Because we're taken by a form of ignorance. It's said that we have two main forms of ignorance. There's the ignorance of not knowing, and then the ignorance of knowing erroneously. The ignorance of not knowing is that in this present moment, we don't know what the causes. The causes were that bringing this present moment, and when we're living we don't understand that there's a correlation between action and result, and and we don't know what will come. And the other ignorance of knowing erroneously is that we think that the reality that we're living is it appears to us as being independent and objective, when instead it's subjective and interdependent. So I mean, if I don't know what my actions will bring, how can I do? I mean, there are two ways of living life independently of the religion that we follow. In the first way, we live our life, trying to survive trying to survive, and we have our values, we have our principles, we have a correct life or not. Depends. Maybe your principle is to cheat everyone or to not cheat anyone. So we try to live, our own coherence, let's say, and we react to what happens. So our emotions, our actions, those are reactions to what happens as the day goes on. As each day goes on, we finish a school, and then then we look for a job, and then we meet someone, and we get married, and life just ways bring to ways in this. The alternative is where I set an objective that goes beyond the conditions of the present moment. I set an objective and I try to interact with awareness that takes me to that objective. So I act with awareness. I don't react in front of what happens. Is that clear? For example, I've seen, even coming back from Nepal by plane, I watched this movie about the two tennis players, Serena Williams, and what's the name of the other one? I can't remember her name. Venus. It's the story of their father. Their father, when they were very young, he programmed, you know, like he set like 87-page program that, you know, what they needed to do to become professional champions. And that was his objective. And he did everything and more so that they could train and go in that direction. So they took that road not as a reaction, you know, I mean, maybe they lived it as a reaction, but for him it was an objective. I'm thinking of my grandfather, for example, my great-grandfather. He chose to do maintenance of refrigerators because he wanted to construct elevators. So he made a choice because he wanted to go somewhere farther. So there are two ways to act. One where, you know, I react in front of things, or I set an objective. It could be material, it could be power, it could be about a human relationship, something physical. And then I try to create causes and conditions that take me where I want to go. I want to be healthy. I want to have a strong, healthy body. And so I need to try to live in a certain way. That, you know, choices that take me there. You know, I am sick and I have symptoms that I don't like. I need to I need to be healed. And so I set an objective of healing and I act accordingly. That's clear, no? Yes and no. In the sense, the first question is what do I want? Because having a karma, to create positive karma, we need to act with love, respect, gratitude. We need to take into consideration others. There's certain emotions that the basis of the action is the motivation. So we should try to act more and more with altruism and less with selfishness. But just the motivation is not enough, because if I'm, even if I'm full of money, but I don't know what to buy, I can buy the wrong things. If I'm full of money and I buy a boat and I buy boats and cars but at the end of the day, then I'm not any happier. So having a lot of positive karma, it doesn't resolve everything, because having a lot of positive karma and not knowing what you want to do is like having a lot of money and not knowing what you want to buy. So the first question is, where do I want to go? But first of all, we start with the choice. I don't want to live my life as a reaction, but I want to live my life with awareness going towards my goal. And not a general goal. That's because Buddha taught us to have the objective of Buddhahood, and then becoming in the meantime becoming becoming a bodhisattva, freeing ourselves of our ignorance. But in the meantime, for example, we need to interact with other people, right? I mean, we have relationships with other people, don't we? So what kind of relationship do I want to have with my father? What kind of relationship do I have with my mother, with my husband, with my wife, with my friends? What kind of relationships do I want to have? Oh, we have a terrible relationship. Every time we see each other, we fight. We're not able to be in the same room without conflict. Sometimes, you know, we don't have a good relationship. Okay. Do you want to continue, having this kind of relationship, or do you want to start having a positive relationship? It's an important question. I mean, people say, no, I don't want to have that relationship. I want to be free from that relationship. Well, at that point, I need to stop reacting based on the dynamics that were already created. Because when we react, we're keeping those same existing dynamics. You fight and you're going to keep fighting more and more. But if I don't want to be in conflict with you, I want to be in harmony with you, then I shouldn't react with conflict. I need to act with awareness to create causes and conditions to be in harmony with you. Remembering that I am my own protector, I am my own enemy, obviously. As Lama Gangchen said many times, or I heard him say, he would say, I chose to give you my friendship. If you give me yours, I accept it well, because I've seen, people, I've some, people that he's helped, these same people have turned their back on him, and he just continued as before, even when they'd come back to him, he just came on like before. I chose to give my friendship. If you give me yours, if you choose not to give me your friendship, that's up to you. It's not my problem. So if I choose to live harmoniously in this relationship with you, it's my choice. It can't be conditioned how you act towards me. Obviously, it can happen that if you act in a certain way and I'm not able in front of that situation to live harmoniously, that's different. But what I mean to say is that even with relationships with other people, what kind of relationship do I want to have? For example, when I started the construction of the temple, one of the objectives that I set is that in this construction site, there shouldn't be any conflicts. Everyone needs to collaborate. There needs to be harmony among everyone. That was the objective I set, and I worked. I gave priority to harmony. Sometimes some jobs took longer, but I gave space to listening to the necessities and the needs of others. And so I didn't just have a practical objective. It was also about seeing the difficulties and looking for solutions together, not blaming others. If something happened.
Se lo facessi io non avrei potuto fare meglio. Neanche se avresti potuto fare meglio non cambiava niente, che lo sta facendo un altro. Di cui mi fido poi.
So once on the construction site, two people showed there was conflict between two people, and so I, so one was hitting the other one was reacting, and then I just took them right, and I said, professionally speaking, you're both competent and able, and it's your choice. If you're able to overcome this conflict, you're welcome to stay. If not, then we need to leave. And we were able. They had to, bite their tongues, but but they were able to go ahead. And this, I heard many workers say that it was the first time that they at the end of the day they didn't want to go home because they were really happy to work here, and it didn't just come out of nothing. I mean, it was really a lot of energy went into constructing and maintaining that harmony. So, but sometimes we make mistakes. Sometimes, we think we go in one direction, we see it doesn't want working out, and then we have to go in another direction. But it's really important to set these objectives and then go towards that. And maybe we don't reach this objective because we're not omniscient. I mean, we don't know what result this action will bring. Once I was with Lama Gangchen, and it was a very important teaching for me because I don't remember exactly the context, but there were many people in Albagnano to receive teachings, about 200 people, and it was maybe 2-3 days, a weekend, and maybe it was a Friday evening. And Lama Gangchen said to me, talking with me, he said, tonight we're going to go to Geneva. I said, tomorrow morning all these people are waiting for us. He said, no, because the Buddha's relics are at the United Nations, and I want to participate. I said, what are we going to do? I mean, how long are the relics going to stay there? I mean, we can go see them later. Let's finish the weekend teachings, and then we can go. He said, no. Then, no, we're going to leave at night. We're going to travel at night. We'll get there at dawn. We'll go to the ceremony. And then we'll come just after lunch, and we can just move, the puja a little bit to the afternoon, and we'll be here tomorrow afternoon. I said, okay. But why can't we just go later? He said, no, because I want to bring the relics to Albagnano, and this is an opportunity. I said, Rinpoche, just a minute. I mean, these relics of Buddha, I mean, they were just parts of the small piece of bone. They belong to 3 countries, Sri Lanka, Thailand, and Burma, and they were offered to the United Nations. And, before going permanently to the headquarters of the United Nations in New York, they're able, it was decided that they would go to only one country and only one city in that country. And I said, I don't think Albagnano is on the top of the list. I mean, of all the cities of Italy, and it seems quite improbable. I mean, how, he said, and then he said something that really taught me so much. He said, when you see an opportunity, you need to do you need to do as much as you can to get it. If it goes well, it goes well. If not, not. And if it doesn't go well, what's the problem? So we left at night. The Simpan class was full of ice, and so the one who drove went to sleep at a house of a friend, and then we went to the United Nations. So we came back. Everything was fine. 2 days later, who was in Albagnano was the custodian of the relics, who came here, and Rinpoche is so forward thinking. He said, I want to bring the relics to Italy. It was accepted, and he said Milan, and they came here in Via Marco Polo Quattro, but they will be they will be held in Albagnano. So they visit Milan, but they sleep in Albagnano. So Rinpoche, he went with the relics to 13 different countries, and in the United Nations, each country can only give one gift. otherwise it would be absolutely filled. And Thailand and Burma, they had already given gifts to the United Nations. So with the Rinpoche was actually the one who was fundamental to leave the relics permanently at the headquarters of the United Nations, which at first it seemed problematic. But I saw then the life many times of Lama Gangchen Rinpoche, where he put energy into something and it didn't go well. And he said, in my life, I just plant seeds. I plant seeds, and then I water, and some flower, some gives fruit, some no. I saw him also put so much energy into people that gave beautiful fruit, and then also lots of energy into some people that didn't give the same. Somebody say, oh, and he never said like, oh, I put so much energy, and then it didn't come well. No. I also learned in 1987, he left Tibet in 1963, and in 1987, China opened up the doors. It's all the lamas who had left Tibet, they were able to go back and visit. And he had seen the Panchen Lama, one of his teachers, represented here in this, here looking towards us here, this image. So the 10th Panchen Lama said, let's do a project together. He said, in the future of the monasteries, they won't be able to depend on donations anymore. We need to take advantage of the resources that exist to create sustainable businesses, and there's let's do business together. There's a hotel, let's do this hotel together. And Franco Ceccarelli was there, and he was so happy to do this project in Tibet with the Panchen Lama. I mean, 2 or 3 months later, they went to Beijing, and in the meantime, political things of various natures happened, and then the project wasn't possible anymore. And Rinpoche was so upset, he got a fever. And the Panchen Lama said, come see me. And Lama Gangchen had to say, I can't come because I'm in bed with fever. And the Panchen Lama answered by Tefillin, stop, making, what is this fever? Stop making so many problems. Come in immediately. And he had, he even in Beijing, he would, pound his fist on the table, and things would get done. I mean, he officialized the Tibetan language. I had the monasteries reopened. Anyway, so Panchen Lama called him. He went to see him really with fever. And he said, what is this? What's going on? For one project that didn't go well, you're in bed with a fever? If every time a project failed for various reasons, if every time I would come down with a fever, I don't know when I'd get out of bed. But if you put energy into something and it doesn't come to fruition, it's the reason to start another 10 projects. Even more. And Lama Gangchen really learned the lesson well. He went home without fever, and he really just put so much energy into things. What I mean to say is we don't know what the results are, and even if we set an objective, it doesn't mean that we'll be able to reach it. How and in the time that we expect. But what we can do is interact and go in the direction of our in the right direction. Has to do on a material level, but it has to do also with the relationships, which is more important, and also our emotional and physical state, our ethical state. I mean, who are we? And so, what is the objective I want to set for myself in this life beyond, reading the news headlines and chatting on social media and going, and and eating delicious foods. I mean, what is it? Where do I want to go? This is a fundamental question. And in this, where do I want to go? There are many possible answers, but I don't want to give you the answer. One wants to, one should go towards nirvana. Yeah, it seems far. The objectives, should the objectives should be set based on where we are. Like, I want to make peace with my past, or work with my emotions. As we said last week, being able to look at ourselves in the mirror and say, I love you. You are good company, and which is not, it's not nice to have to look in the mirror and say to yourself, you're not good company. But I think, it's really important to be able to look in the mirror and be able to say to yourself, if I could do everything over, I would want to do it all again with you. I want to be with you, So depending on our objective, we interact and we go in that direction. We interact, we go in that direction. Because being impermanent doesn't mean that we don't have freedom. It means that we are in constant transformation, and every moment that we live, every choice that we have, every thought that we have, every interaction directs how we transform. So I invite you to live your lives with awareness. And then, and this awareness changes as we go on. Things transform, but take the reins in your hands. And at the beginning, you don't know how to use them well. You want to go in one direction, you end up in another. That's fine. But what's important is try to direct ourselves. Okay, I wanted to go there and I ended up there. Okay, fine. Now you need to go back and try to find the way, but act with awareness and not react with like a comfortable survival. One's objective could be, in this lifetime, I want to leave a positive imprint for the environment, for society. I want to be a good example for my children. And the first objective is to have an objective, which is not obvious at all. Just 2 words I'm going to say, because the time is what it is. But I realize that most of us, we're not able to dream. We follow others' dreams. Most of us. There are few people who are able to dream and go beyond. And Buddhism is about following Buddha's dream. Buddha had this dream, this objective, for everyone to become a Buddha. We follow that dream. But the real danger is stopping to dream, or is not having a dream, is living without direction, is letting life, letting life go by, just merely surviving the day, getting through the day. In the past, it was pane circo, bread and circus, and now it's pizza and Netflix. But let's not let our lives slip through our fingers. Tips. Don't live as if you're just surviving, but live with awareness. And this where we want to go, and this awareness, it changes as we go. But have this awareness, at least, that this awareness makes a difference. of what I am and how I interact. And just the last thing that's important in all of this, we shouldn't be in a hurry to get to the result, and we shouldn't have the attachment to get to that result in the how and the why, but we should be in a hurry to walk in the right way, because we don't know when we're going to get there. Maybe we want to get there, and then as we go, we realize our objective is something else, but we should be walking in the right direction. It's important to walk. It's more important to be walking and not getting there. Today I wanted to talk about something totally different. Impermanence was just the opening to talk about the two systems that exist. This is, bringing the results into the path, we'll talk about this next week. Our dedications now. Let's make our dedications now.
Lame kotse rapten chin nam karatin le chokchur gepada losan tempe drume sasumgi druwe musel takto negurchi kewa kuntu yanda lamadan drame chiki pela longcheching sada lamgi yunten rabzone dorje change kopa nyurtob sho nimodele tsendele nime kuyan delekshin ninsen takto delekpe kuncho sumki chingi lob kuncho sumki ngodrubatsol kuncho sumki trashisho.
At dawn or at dusk, at night or midday, may the three jewels grant us their blessings. May they help us to achieve all realizations and sprinkle the path of our lives with various signs of auspiciousness. Tashidele. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.